Afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us for today's technical demo series on Microsoft Management with Reporting. My name is Bob Rose. I'm the Senior Product Marketing Manager for DNS, DHCP, and IPAM, located in our Tacoma office in Washington State. And we are privileged to have with us today Steve Sallow. Steve is our Principal Systems Engineer, and he's located in Santa Clara, California. Welcome, Steve.
Thanks, Bob. Good morning.
All right. Well, before we get to the good stuff, we'd like to mention a few housekeeping items. So we are recording today's event, and we'll publish it in the Infoblox experts community and also on YouTube. We'll be also sending out a link so that you can view this again if you'd like to, or perhaps send it on to a colleague that may not have been able to make today's call. Also, if you have questions, please enter them through the chat window in the Zoom console. We'll try to answer them as best we can in real time, but we'll also take some time at the end for Q&A. And then also today we have a couple of polling questions, and we'd really appreciate your feedback so we can better tailor the content to your interests. And then finally, we'll be sending you a copy of our recent Tolly report, Free versus Automated DDI. It's really about the total cost of ownership of using the Infoblox authoritative IPAM for DNS and DHCP. And then also we have a IPAM integration with Microsoft Active Directory sites and services white paper, and we'd like to send that out to you as well in appreciation for your attendance today. So as we get started, today we're going to show you how to save time and automate DDI with Microsoft Management. And Steve, as we get started here, what are some of the key concerns and problems that network and Microsoft admins face regarding DDI?
Sure, Bob. Yeah, there's really a few of these, and ones that come to top of mind are inefficiencies. So there's always inefficiencies and problems, caused by IP management via things like spreadsheets and maybe even home-built tools and kind of the whole manual, non-integrated processes. Another thing that comes to mind is performance. Things like IP conflicts and potential network outages and those types of concerns. Visibility is definitely a big one. How do you manage DNS and DHCP across the entire network, entire environment, especially if you've got multiple environments or maybe mergers and acquisitions and different things like that. And there's, different concerns there. Everybody's looking at these days, but DNS and DHCP can kind of be that thing that keeps it from, it's not fully automated and integrated in that perspective. Talking about integration, things like AD integration, being able to, really streamline and manage things like sites and services, kind of getting that under control. Identity mapping, really getting greater visibility into who's on what IP address and when they logged in, all that type of information, and then really taking all that and looking at reporting. So getting, more visibility into the network and into the IP space, and getting things like historical reporting and trending and audit and usage and metrics. You can do things like capacity planning. So, there's really a lot of concerns out there for DDI environment.
Well, so that's a lot. I'm not sure if I was the only one, but I think your audio was kind of coming in and out there a little bit. But basically, you were talking about inefficiencies in performance, visibility, manual processes, integration, and of course, sites and services and identity mapping and reporting. And those are all key things we're going to share with you today, actually. So let's go ahead and jump into our agenda. We're going to spend a little time today talking about key IT networking priorities and challenges. We're going to also share the Microsoft Management Overview and some of the use cases, and then we'll jump into a little more detail around the Microsoft Management advantages. We have some case studies, and then we're going to do a wrap up with some Q&A. So that's really where we're going today. And in terms of looking at key IT networking priorities, what are the specific objectives for DHCP, DNS, and IPAM in a data center network? And at Infoblox, we really looked at across kind of our customer base to see what commonalities there were, and we wanted to categorize the goals, and we really distilled them down into these 4 buckets. So it's efficiency, visibility, management, and manageability, and security. And so Steve, you know, as we consider these, what are some of the areas of efficiency that companies are looking for today?
Right. So when we talk about efficiency, we're talking about really delivering scaling core services across multiple networks and zones, integrating with sites and services, and mapping user identity, and all that kind of in an automated simple process.
All right, and then visibility, right, is absolutely essential.
Right, because you can't control what you can't see. So there's a lot to visibility, and when a network is growing and getting insight into which networks and which IPs are available, all of that really helps with better management planning.
And one of the key things that Infoblox really focuses on is being able to see all of that, right? All of that visibility through a single pane of glass. And that's really a huge advantage when you can see across your network and see everything that's attached to it.
Right.
And then another area, of course, is manageability.
Right, manageability. So integrating things like workflows and processes across the infrastructure to really increase that manageability and reduce the operational effort and costs. So we have a number of integrations as well, using APIs and plugins to really integrate with other workflow tools.
Yeah, that's outstanding to have that. And then of course security. Where would we be without security?
Right. The vulnerability of DNS really remains a critical concern for everyone's data center. So security is definitely an issue that's at the forefront, and we have ways that we can help with that.
Okay, so why don't we talk a little bit about some of the challenges that exist? And again, we did some more research around the whole area of DDI, and one of the areas that we found was inefficient processes. 8 out of 10 customers that were surveyed managed DNS with a manual spreadsheet, or perhaps with a custom script, or perhaps they have a work-built tool that they use. 8 out of 10, that's pretty amazing. Another area is limited oversight, because 81% of those surveyed wanted discovery. They wanted to be able to control those newly spun up assets, but it's hard to do that if you can't see everything that's on the network. And then of course, challenges with disparate platforms. 79% reported that there were 3 or more platforms in use at one time, and that makes it really difficult so that all teams are optimized and working off the same real-time set of data. And then ultimately security and compliance, and DNS remains the #1 most common application threat vector, and that's a big concern. So Steve, maybe you can just share with us some of the additional thoughts around inefficient processes, for example.
Right, yeah, and like you mentioned, spreadsheets are always a challenge, because you've got multiple people going into it. It's really only as good as how accurate it's maintained and updated. Things like lack of integration into sites and services, giving you that visibility, unable to really tie an IP address to a particular user that's on the network, or when they came into the network. And really a lot of the time wasted troubleshooting and tracking down IP addresses and what IP and those types of things from a process perspective.
Yeah, and then another area, of course, as we just mentioned, just the ability to see what's on the network.
Right. So lacking that central authoritative view of the network and the IP space and all the DNS and the DHCP information, the ability to see the available services and the networks across that space, and lack of visibility into maybe protocol performance too. You're having an issue with DNS performance or DHCP performance, and
user has
what
to
does
retype the password
patterns look like?
In the black.
Okay, and then also just in the area of various platforms, right? So that also can be a pretty substantial challenge.
Right, because you can have, especially as organizations, grow, or through mergers and acquisitions, you can have different platforms. So you may have a Microsoft environment, but you also may have another platform providing some DNS and DHCP services, or some open source platform and so forth. And you've got, often silos across different environments as well. So there isn't sharing of data across it. So it really becomes, an operational challenge and very inefficient when you have all these different platforms.
Yeah, and then, the other area, of course, is security and DNS. We've talked about that, but there's all sorts of threats today, right, that IT teams have to face.
Right, right. There's the general DDoS types of attacks, but there's also malware leveraging and using DNS, and it's very easy to activate data via DNS. So there's lots of security risks and compliance risks and everything, all tied to that DNS layer.
Yeah, so that, teams are faced with a lot of challenges today. The good news is that, we have a solution at Infoblox, and what we'd like to do right now is just kind of share what Microsoft Management is. So Steve, can you give us a little bit of an overview? What is Microsoft Management?
Right. Yeah, so what it really does is it kind of extends the value of the Microsoft solution by integrating DNS and DHCP into our IPAM platform. So giving you the ability to manage and have oversight and the visibility and integration into all that information. So you have really a central management and visibility to all of the DNS and DHCP. And really you can then start to automate some of that DNS and DHCP as far as just managing the services as well as just all of the data syncing.
So then, can you tell us a little more about how it works? I mean, what's the premise behind Microsoft Management?
Right. So what it does is it really provides an IP address management or an IPAM solution for the Microsoft DNS and DHCP service. So we're able to replace spreadsheets, replace home-built tools, replace those manual processes, with really a more cost-effective and automated type of process and workflow. It also integrates with Active Directory for site and service management, delivers identity mapping, so you can track the users and which IPs they're on and when they logged in, and then give you reporting and analytics for audit metrics and planning all around that as well.
All right. So, there's lots of folks, network folks, Microsoft folks on the call today. What's in it for them, right? I mean, what's the value that they perhaps might be interested to know about?
Right. Right. Yeah. So some of the values are really instant DNS replication. So instead of having to wait on things like AD replication, you can leverage our Infoblox Grid Sync for that really fast, instantaneous replication. Things like high availability to improve access to the protocol services will be things like DNS and DHCP or DHCP failover, and really reduce security risk as well. So we're able to do things like DHCP fingerprinting to identify all the devices across the networks, things like our advanced DNS protection that really protects or self-protects the DNS service from malicious traffic and DDoS types of attacks, things like automated provisioning of IP addresses. That one's huge to be able to even tying into your existing DNS and DHCP, but be able to have an automated process where users can automatically assign their own IP address or via an API or plug in into VMware or similar orchestration product, and really start automating the assignment of IP addresses and do things like that when you're spinning up virtual machines in different cloud environments. And you can do things in seconds instead of having to wait on different teams to allocate records. And also, all of this gives you the visibility across the environment and all the historical data as well, so you can see who's allocated what, which networks are in use, what are the trends and patterns look like from a DNS and DHCP perspective. And it gives you the ability to, not only plan for the future from a capacity perspective, but because you have all this data and metrics, you can look for, from a security perspective, anomalies and different things like that may be a concern in the infrastructure.
Yeah, no, so that's really a good overview. So thanks for sharing that, Steve. Well, let's take a moment now and kind of look at some of the leading use cases. So in the area of core network DDI, really, folks are looking at the targeted outcome of next level automation. You were just talking about that, right? Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Right, right. So the next level automation, that's really where we're going. Be able to automate, the DNS and DHCP services and the integration with that, and really, give you that visibility and that core service and core functionality.
And plus the data itself is, virtually near real time, right? So, I mean, what an advantage to have, especially if you have multiple teams working on core network DDI content.
Right, right.
Yeah, another area is access control, right, Steve?
Right, yeah, so access control. So with role-based access, you can determine who has access to which particular servers, which particular data, or even which particular records from a from an IPAM or from a DNS and DHCP perspective.
And then there's also, server installation and configuration, right? Which can really be, it can be a pain at times, right?
Right, right. Yeah, having to deploy, servers and storage and, policies and all the various services and everything that, is running on there because it's, let's face it, the Microsoft server is a multi-purpose server. So there's many different things that it can do. But to be able to streamline some of the critical services like the DNS and DHCP services and be able to manage those separately is very beneficial.
And then, of course, the area of network automation, right?
Right, right. So, automating the network service or the network devices and service and provisioning and, really ensuring optimal network uptime and performance as well.
And then ultimately, nothing stays the same, right? So there's always change and managing change management, especially in the area also of reporting, right?
Right, right. Yeah, so that's huge for change management and be able to report on exactly what's changed and who changed what, having the audit logs and the reports and the policies to be able to really track that and report on that.
Yeah. Well, one of the challenges though that lots of folks are dealing with is, they have freeware, right? They're using the Microsoft solution, the Microsoft IPAM solution, but we found, right, that they're just in talking to our customers, there's a number of deficiencies with that. Can you maybe walk us through some of these?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So as many of us know, Microsoft does provide an IPAM solution that can be kind of bolted on and leveraged with their DNS and DHCP services, but there's some challenges with that. So it can't exist on the same, operating system with DHCP without having a SQL server. So then there's another server that needs to be deployed. You have to think about, what do you need for redundancy and maybe a SQL cluster for that. So you have all of these, various requirements. You have, IPAM, DNS, DHCP, a SQL server, Active Directory. You're looking at least 5 servers there. And then when you think about patching and having to reboot the environment, and it becomes very, very tedious to manage and really kind of negates some of the benefits of having, an automated IPAM solution.
Yeah, so it's difficult to manage. There's so many different, components, plus the reboots impact the network availability. I mean, you've got all of these challenges. What else, you know, have we found, Steve, as you've talked to customers?
Right. So the discovery is somewhat lacking. So there is some discovery, but it doesn't find everything that's out there on the network. So you often have to manually go ahead and add, additional devices and components and IPs and possibly even networks in there to get the full picture.
So this is an advantage for our Microsoft management solution because we do provide, very robust discovery capabilities. How about replication? That's pretty key for IPAM, right?
Right, right. Yeah, you really want that real time replication. So you have the up to date or always up to date view of the infrastructure and the IP space. And what we've seen is sometimes in Microsoft IPAM solution, when you make a change in one GUI in one environment, it may be a while before it shows up in another environment, or it may not be detected at all. And often AD replication can take up to 15 minutes, especially in environments with poor performance running or poor configurations in there.
Yeah, I'm sure that many on the call today have probably experienced some of that as well. What about Microsoft's Next IP? It seems like there's some boundary challenges there as well, right?
Right, right. Yeah, there's some logic boundary challenges in there. So sometimes the next IP function will actually assign an IP from the IP of the actual network, which could be problematic if it's handed out from DHCP or assigned device, and that could potentially bring down the entire network if you get a duplicate IP on that or an invalid IP address.
Yeah, so these are some pretty substantial challenges. But again, if we take a look at what Microsoft Management from Infoblox can offer, it's really right all about empowering Microsoft and network admins.
Right, right. Yeah, so it's really giving you from the Infoblox management console, if you will, full DNS and DHCP integration and visibility across the infrastructure. So you get centralized management of not only Infoblox DNS and DHCP services, but also all the Microsoft-based DNS and DHCP. And there's an agentless connection into the Microsoft environment, so you don't have to worry about any overhead of additional agents running on any of the servers or any of the impact associated with that. You get things like automated syncing of all of the infrastructure and all the DDI components from a workflow and from a time-saving perspective. AD integration for streamlined management of the sites and services information. The identity mapping that I've mentioned, so be able to pull in all of the users that have logged into the Microsoft environments and correlate that to their IP address. And then really the historical reporting and analytics too, because we can extract a lot of the data from the Microsoft environment and then give you that perspective from a reporting and analytics perspective.
And then also, right, looking forward too, right? Because we have the ability to plan what our DHCP leases are based on the analytics algorithms that are proprietary to Infoblox but built in.
Right. We have some unique algorithms in our reporting and look at the historical trending and then predict 3 months from now or a year from now what is your utilization and performance capacity going to look like. So that's very beneficial from a future planning perspective.
It's helpful so that you don't run out of leases, right?
Right.
Nobody wants a 2 o'clock in the morning call. So, well, there's some other things too, just in terms of being able to provide that integration and multi-team support. So, Steve, perhaps you can walk us through a little bit. You mentioned seamless integration, right?
Right. So we'll automatically synchronize with the Microsoft DNS and services. We're certified for Active Directory support. There's no agent or no required, no server impact. We also really enable bidirectional, kind of cross-team cooperation. So Microsoft admins can delegate roles within the IPAM solution and break that up with role-based access. We can also use the Microsoft Management Console, and we'll still sync things bidirectional. So you can give up anything. If anything, you're really enhancing the environment and the experience, and that really allows different teams to work together and use some of the same tools as well as different tools, but still get to the same kind of end objective. And from an enterprise management perspective, things like monitoring alerts, we can trigger alerts on things like your DHCP pool, going right to or at things like utilization from from a metrics perspective and looking for potential errors and corrections, and then being able to really kind of display all of that data as well, so we can track and tag extensible attributes to different things like networks and hosts and devices, and create what we call smart folders based on that to kind of logically create groupings and folders of all of your IP data in kind of any way you see fit. So giving you all that advantage, and then also having the consolidated audit log, so be able to track who's made what changes, who accidentally deleted that record that caused an outage at 3 a.m. You have all of that data from an audit and compliance perspective.
Yeah, I mean, just the access to the data is outstanding to be able to manage that. It's right all at your fingertips, right? I mean, it's just a few keystrokes away. So another thing is, the Microsoft security overlay that we have available as well. Can you talk to this a little bit, Steve?
Sure, right. So one of the key advantages of this is you don't have to change out anything in the current, DNS and DHCP or Microsoft environment. And we can really provide an overlay for providing security. And that can be done either on-prem with some Infoblox infrastructure on-prem to allow the DNS queries to flow through that, or leveraging our cloud service as well. And we can leverage reputational data. So we have our own threat feeds. You can leverage either on-prem or in the cloud to detect and block queries to malicious domain names. And we also have what we call our threat insight, which is really behavioral analytics. So we can do this both on-prem or in the cloud, but we can look at the actual DNS traffic and the patterns and detect things like data exfiltration, for example. So people that are exfiltrating data within DNS queries because they're querying for social security number.badsite.com maybe it's mixed up a little bit so it doesn't exactly look like a social security number, but it's really easy to exfiltrate data via DNS to do that, and we're able to detect that and block those types of things. And it's really easy to add that on to an existing environment and just have the DNS traffic flow through our infrastructure.
So that being said, then they wouldn't have to worry about pulling out their existing Microsoft infrastructure, right? Because then we're just kind of coming alongside and helping to increase and enhance the value of what they already have, but still provide that security overlay.
Exactly. So with the Microsoft management, we can give you the visibility into the existing, Microsoft DNS, DHCP, and give you control over that as well. But then we can also add that additional layer of security without having to, change out and replace any of those Microsoft servers.
Yeah, it's really good. So let's take a moment and talk about reporting. We've spent some time today talking about network visibility, but the reporting and analytics capability, right, is very simple. It's very cost effective to deploy. Steve, can you share some things with us on that?
Yeah, sure. So the reporting and analytics appliance, it looks like just any other member of an Infoblox grid. So basically it becomes a part of that grid, and it gives you an additional reporting tab within the UI where you can display things like, the historical metrics on, DHCP and DNS protocol performance, things like the audit log information, and things like pulling in, even via Microsoft DNS analytics, looking at DNS query logging and information there. And the reporting appliance also provides different forms for scalability and DR and highly available solutions as well. And the licensing for that is really flexible as well, because we can basically scale depending on the volume of traffic that it needs to consume and display data on a daily basis.
Yeah, and maybe just to mention also the data connector that we have, which really offloads that data so that you don't have an impact, right, on your DNS, DHCP, and it's a free appliance, but that is really an advantage because it helps you with performance and bandwidth issues as well, right, Steve?
Right, because it can take a lot of that DNS data, instead of having to write it all to syslog and send it off somewhere else. It can take all that data, deduplicate it, and then feed it directly into our reporting, so it really minimizes the data overhead and also the impact on the infrastructure as well.
Well, one of the other key advantages for Microsoft Management is the pre-built reports, right? I mean, we have over 100 pre-built reports out of the box that are available. There are some that are showing here around DNS and DHCP, and just a real advantage to have those accessible. Steve, can you give us some insight on the sample report guide and what perhaps customers might be able to find there?
Sure. Yeah, you can see in the listing here, there's a number of reports and things like, the top clients, for example, are always interesting to see who's querying DNS the most, or, just general trending, like, the query rates by the particular, member or the server that's generating or receiving that load of queries, or by query type. So, you have a lot of quad A queries that are occurring because there's V6 or devices that are trying to find V6 resources in the environment. So there's a lot of different metrics, and we can collect this information whether you're running DNS services on Infoblox or running in an existing Microsoft environment. So it's really beneficial from there. From a DHCP perspective, too, things like lease history, being able to track which device or which IP and MAC address have been associated over a period of time, or top lease clients, who's requesting the most. Is there some problem there with one of those types of devices? And then looking at trends and historical utilization as well, to be able to do some of that predictive analysis that we talked about, where you can determine that, hey, I need to expand this network space or expand this scope because it looks like I'm going to run out in the next couple months.
Yeah, so the key thing here, right, is that these reports have been built by Microsoft, Microsoft Management Infoblox engineers, and so they know exactly, based on years of experience, what are the most compelling reports, but they're also pre-built on the Splunk reporting and visualization engine. So if you have reporting capability and Splunk expertise, you can take these reports right off the shelf and customize them and manage them to whatever needs that you specifically have. You can set up some automated alerting and distribution as well, and so you don't have to constantly be going into the reporting tool. You can just set those up automatically so that they can distribute updates to your team. So that makes it really fast and easy. You set it up once and then you can see exactly what's going on the network.
Exactly.
So let's take a moment now, and we're going to move over to the demo, and we have our special technical marketing engineer, and his name is Phil Parker, and he presented a recent demo, and so I want to share that with you now. So go ahead and sit back, and here's exactly the solution that we have with Microsoft Management.
Here we have a grid with Microsoft Management enabled. We have 4 grid members, a GM, GMC, reporting, and a network discovery. We also have 3 Microsoft servers, Active Directory, DNS, and 2 DHCP servers. We have a single network which is managed by Microsoft. It's supplying both DNS and DHCP. It's authoritative for both. And we are syncing this across from the Microsoft servers. As you can see, we have 3 clients. These clients are Microsoft clients. We also monitor network users who have logged in and out of the system. So obviously these guys are logging in and out of those clients, and also the ADNS server as well. As you can see, we have quite deep history. The DHCP, you can see the lease history. Obviously it's spread across because we're in a failover pair with these 2 Microsoft servers. And we are only using Microsoft servers for this environment. And there you can see the failover association. We're also serving DNS off it as well. Here's the grid. Note that we're running NTP. And here are the Microsoft servers themselves. As you can see, DNS and DHCP. We can also see the Active Directory domains that are being synced. Our syslog also provides a separate Microsoft log as well, so we can see the interactions between our grid and the Microsoft servers and the way that they are syncing. And for a simple logon history, we have, obviously Splunk is picking up all of this information. We can do searches like and we can see Huey, Dewey, and Louie. Obviously, any information that's brought across into NIOS will end up in the reporting server, so we can use that information for reports as well. Anyway, that's a very quick demo.
All right, so Steve, any thoughts that you have on that? Just fairly simple, right? Overview on that demo.
Right, yeah, it's a good quick overview, and it gives you an idea of some of the visibility and the information that you can get. And that's, to set a little context too, it's really easy to set up that integration. Basically, you define the Microsoft server, you give it the credentials to sync with it, and it makes RPC or remote procedure calls to the Microsoft server to sync all that information in, and then all of a sudden you have all of this this visibility information that you can take actions on.
Well, and the other thing that's really nice about that is it's so easy, right? I mean, everything is filter driven. So, you can pick, pull down the tabs and you can do virtually whatever you need. It's so easy. And it's very intuitive to see exactly what you need to do to manage DNS, DHCP, and IPAM.
Exactly.
Let's look at a couple of case studies specifically around customers that used IPAM. So the first one is Council Rock School District. This, of course, is in the education market, public school vertical. They were really looking for visibility and efficiency. This is not a small school district, right? This is the 12th largest school district in Pennsylvania. They serve more than 11,000 students. They have 16 different campus locations. Steve, why don't you tell us a little bit about this particular customer opportunity?
Sure, right. So they had some challenges, really with a lot of decentralized Microsoft DHCP services, and they had a lot of network infrastructure too that they wanted to manage more efficiently and also provide some protection from malware on the infrastructure. So there's a number of things that they were looking to do and kind of consolidate. So what they ended up doing was really putting in Infoblox DNS, DHCP, IP address management, our DNS firewall to mitigate against malware. That's leveraging DNS, and also our NetMRI solution for management of those layer 2, layer 3 infrastructure devices, be able to do network configuration and change management around that, along with a couple of Infoblox appliances to provide additional services. So really they're able to reduce the number of issues that they were having, prevent or mitigate against unauthorized changes in the environment, really automate. Automation is key for everyone. A lot of the manual processes and the spreadsheets that they were using, and with some of the security benefits, they could really identify and remediate machines and devices that were infected with malware. So it was really a win-win for them.
Yeah, it's interesting the comment too that Matthew made, their IT director, said if you are responsible for safeguarding your network and you're not using DNS firewall, you're not doing your job. So he is pretty passionate about that, but it made a huge impact for Council Rock School District. So a pretty good study there. Another one that we have is in the healthcare space. This is actually in the small to medium-sized business market, healthcare, of course. And again, they were looking at visibility and efficiency. Perhaps maybe some of you know Steward. They have 17,000 employees. They have 2,000 hospital beds, 11 hospitals, and they serve more than 150 communities. This is not a small organization, more medium-sized. But Steve, what were they looking for? What were their challenges?
Right. So a lot of their challenges revolved around mergers and acquisitions. So they actually had 8 new sites that they brought into the picture and different technology and solutions. And imagine having eight different 80 domains or different forests and having to manage all of the DNS infrastructure. And they also had some existing other platforms and didn't have a lot of funding either. So they had to figure out how can they get a handle on all of this infrastructure. So with the Infoblox solution, to give them the Microsoft management function and even some core DNS and DHCP services, they're really able to consolidate a lot of that infrastructure and bring it down to, from 40 plus domain controllers down to just a few appliances, provide that centralized services, all the visibility, and then, kind of really puts them in place to be able to start layering security on top of that.
Yeah, I mean, a great story. And then, of course, there's a federal government application as well. This is a federal U.S. agency. We can't really divulge who it is, but with some creative thinking, I'm sure you can figure it out. This is an organization that's responsible for highly classified and sensitive information, and they do a lot of functions around commerce and growth of the U.S. economy. So, they also had some fairly substantial challenges.
Right. So they had some legacy systems, some open source bind, and some QIP, and some other infrastructure in there that really over the years became too difficult to manage and too separate from some of the services. And they're also having some reliability issues. So they looked at consolidating and replacing as much as they could with that, and also bringing in Microsoft with Active Directory and into the infrastructure, and putting in really a solution that could manage that, provide some services as well. search a layer of security in there with the DNS firewall, plan for things like disaster recovery and high availability. And really they're able to then integrate into a single secure platform that could provide and manage all of those services, so they can have high availability, improved performance. And another key thing for them was really the automated DNS blacklisting. So that's that DNS firewall function where they can pull in reputational feeds to automatically block queries to known malicious domains and addresses that they resolve to. So that was a big benefit for them.
Yeah, I mean, that's huge. That's so interesting to see the impact that Infoblox solution had for this agency. Well, what we'd like to do now is kind of move things over to some questions. Now, we, of course, have worked with a lot of different customers, and we've had some frequently asked questions that have come in historically, and so we want to share those out. But perhaps as we share those with you, your specific organizational scenario may post some new questions. So feel free to enter those in the chat window. One question that we hear a lot is, Active Directory requires Microsoft DNS to function properly. Steve, what's the thought on that?
Right. So yeah, Microsoft Active Directory clearly does require DNS, but it does not require Microsoft DNS. So Microsoft's actually stated that as long as it supports certain standards like the RFC standards and certain other criteria from security like GSS-TSIG, for example. And there's actually a TechNet article on that, on how Microsoft Active Directory can work with third-party DNS servers.
Yeah, and then some, have made the comment that Microsoft DNS is more secure with Active Directory due to the integration. What would you say about that?
So I would say it's as secure, because we use the same mechanism for securing the updates and basically the communication channel between DNS and Active Directory, and that's GSS-TSIG, to secure those updates, whether they're coming in from client devices into Infoblox DNS or right from Active Directory into Infoblox DNS.
All right, so another commonly asked question is that Microsoft Active Directory requires a DNS SRV records. Does Infoblox support this? And will Microsoft support Active Directory configurations using Infoblox? So, Steve, what have you typically explored with customers?
So yes, we support SRV records. And not only for Active Directory use, but for other uses of SRV records around telephony and different things as well. So those are fully supported and can be created dynamically by the domain controllers or manually as well.
All right, and we have lots of customers, right, using Infoblox DNS in their Active Directory environment. So that doesn't seem to be an issue at all.
Right, yep.
So another one that comes up, will I lose the ability to administer DNS when we move to Infoblox?
So no, not at all.
Cricket coming here, or we are meeting him?
I'm assuming we're going to meet him at the office, but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Some audio feedback there.
Yeah, sorry, we're getting some audio feedback. If
this
you're
is that
on,
Microsoft
if you could mute your line,
broadcast
appreciate that.
with Bob Rose. Yeah, this is the end. Last few questions.
Yeah, so to answer the question there, Bob, yeah, you don't have to give up anything because you can continue to manage it via the existing Microsoft Management Console or role-based access. It can be carved out, and you can determine who has access to which domains and which IPs, and manage all that as well.
All right, that's really good, Steve. So why don't we just take a quick moment and actually before we go to our questions here, there was a question from Jeff. Was there a limitation on the number of Active Directory forests the MSM could synchronize with? Steve, any thoughts on that?
So there's no
So your
technical
concern is
limitation
still
to
that somebody might use this proxy.
I would prefer they don't use the proxy. It does,
I don't know if we can mute everyone or
there was a
how that would work, but there's no technical limitation to the number of forests and domains that I can sync with. there is, based on the appropriate sizing on how many Microsoft servers and environments an individual appliance or virtual machine can sync with. So it's basically just a matter of sizing that appropriately to sync with a large environment.
Okay, Jeff, hopefully that answers your question. To the audience, are there any other open questions that you have? If so, you can go ahead and unmute your line and feel free to ask the question. Steve, I think we did a pretty good job. There doesn't seem to be many more questions here.
Great.
If you still have some questions, we'd like to address those. Go ahead and put those in the Zoom group chat window. And if any more come in, we will address those. Otherwise, we'd like to just go ahead and summarize. Steve, why Infoblox Microsoft Management? Obviously, there's advantages around the distribution of DDI management across both networks and Microsoft Teams, but what are some of the key differentiators?
Right, so it's really that centralization and automation of DNS, DHCP, and IP address management. So bringing it all into one place, being able to leverage whether you leverage the UI or even the APIs to do all the provisioning and automation.
Yeah, and then another area obviously is extending the existing infrastructure that you have already, the investment you have with Microsoft, with Infoblox IPAM. The thing is here that, and I'm pretty sure you haven't heard that we're saying, tear out your whole infrastructure. Not at all. What we're talking about is, making what you already have even more effective. And so, Steve, perhaps some differentiators around, coming alongside and adding to what they already have in place.
Right. Yeah. So the reporting and analytics is a huge differentiator because you can add all the reporting and alerts right onto the existing infrastructure and solution that's in place. So you can detect things like IP conflicts and avoid outages and assist with troubleshooting and compliance and some of that predictive analytics as well.
Yeah, that's really good. And also the area of having that secure role-based DDI management.
Right, right. So being able to, identify and map IP addresses to users and devices, and do things with role-based access as well in the platform. So it really gives you a lot of benefits from a security perspective.
Yeah, that's a good insight. And then also having that seamless integration into your existing Microsoft infrastructure. What about that area?
Right. So not only having that visibility and the integration and ability to manage, the DNS and DHCP services, but also the integration with Active Directory and sites and services. So be able to pull that information in, correlate that to your networks, really kind of organize and optimize that. And then if your sites and services information don't really match up with your networks, it gives you the ability to kind of correlate that, line that appropriately, and then sync that back to the Microsoft environment so you can have a in-sync perspective of your sites with the actual networks.
Yeah, I mean, all of these points, right, can really help network and Microsoft Teams and give time back, really, to what they have to do in daily management of their infrastructure. What we'd like to do now is just address a couple of next steps in terms of engagement. Excuse me. There are a lot of Microsoft management resources available to you. Most of these are available on the website, the Infoblox website. We have an authoritative IPAM data sheet. There's an identity mapping data sheet if you're specifically interested in that. If you're more interested in just kind of getting an overview of the cost of free versus automated DDI, we are sending the Tally report out to you as well. We have lots of resources around infrastructure. We have a solution note. We have an IPAM best practices white paper. There's an integration with Active Directory solution note as well, along with some information on how we integrate with sites and services. And then we have a next gen IPAM for Microsoft. There's lots of videos on YouTube as well. So just a lot of different resources that are available. And of course, you can always reach out to us. Our number is listed there. You can also reach out to info@infoblox.com. And so lots of resources. We would love to have a conversation with you. We look forward to engaging with you. We hope that you found this presentation helpful today. And so Steve, thanks so much for joining us and walking us through this information. And to our audience, we appreciate your time and attendance today. We hope that we can be of further help to you. We thank you for joining our call and wish you a good day. This concludes our presentation. Thanks everyone. Take care.